But first, this country, Australia, is now so deep in debt that our grandchildren will still be paying it off, and their children too. Gross federal debt is tipped to reach nearly $1 trillion next June. And yet, Prime Minister Scott Morrison last night still managed to somehow magic up yet another $1 billion from, I don't know, back of the couch or something and hand it over to our neighbours during his speech to the Glasgow Global Warming Summit.
We are doubling our initial climate finance commitment for our Pacific family and Southeast Asian partners to $2 billion.
So now we're handing over $2 billion in total. And this, Scott Morrison says, is to help these poor countries fight global warming, although we find out the money's actually going for the usual things like roads, schools and hospitals. And this, by the way, is why Pacific Island countries all say, yes, 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 global warming is killing us, it's drowning us, because fools like us then come and throw a couple of $1 billion at them. Now, sure, some of this money may well do some good, but lying about why you're spending it, what good does that do? Because, yes, the Prime Minister last night went over to the dark side, I'm afraid. He started to repeat the global warming lies that are now pouring out of Glasgow. He said there was no greater threat to our Pacific family, to the blue economy, than climate change. Now that is actually completely false. Morrison is spending your billions on a lie. And I say it again, the evidence is clear. We're told the global warming is so dangerous. Well, if it's so clear, why all these lies? No greater threat to Pacific countries than climate change. In fact, the science is clear, but not like the warmers say. There has been no increase in cyclones in our area. If anything, the opposite, a fall. And low-lying atoll islands are not drowning at all from rising seas. Again, the opposite. One study of 27 atoll islands going back 60 years now showed 43% were actually growing, not drowning, and another 43% were stable. A French study found exactly the same. Of 30 atolls, including 709 islands, not one atoll lost land area, and nearly 89% of islands were either stable or they increased in area. And this evidence is so obvious that even the ABC was this year finally forced to stop lying about drowning islands in the Pacific and admit that, well, in fact, yes, hundreds of Pacific islands were actually getting bigger, like I've been trying to tell them for a decade. This sinking islands story, islands destroyed by global warming, is a hoax. But did you hear a single journalist in Glasgow, and there are plenty there, tell the Prime Minister, hey, Mr. Morrison, you're wrong. You just spent $2 billion of our money on a fake crisis. Now, you know, whenever I talk about global warming, I show you a lot of evidence, and I know I risk boring some people, I know, and yet it's only when you've been given the facts that you can actually tell how outrageously the leaders at this Glasgow summit are lying. Even one hysteric after another claiming that we face extinction.
Enough of burning and drilling and mining our way deeper. We are digging our own graves.
1.5 is what we need to survive.
The decisions you make here will help determine whether children will have food and water.
What you just heard is complete bull. I should really say the whole word because I've never heard such crap in my life. I've shown you the evidence many times. I won't go through it all again. The world grain crops keep setting new records. Life expectancy increasing. Your chances of dying in a climate-related disaster have never in history been this low. So the preaching of doom at Glasgow is a complete joke. Speaking of jokes, here's the chief clown, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, citing not science, not at all, come off it, but a fictional spy.
Welcome to Glasgow and to Scotland, whose most globally famous fictional son is almost certainly a man called James Bond, who generally comes to the climax of his highly lucrative films strapped to a doomsday device, desperately trying to work out which coloured wire to pull to turn it off, while a red digital clock ticks down remorselessly to a detonation that will end human life as we know it. And we are in roughly the same position, my fellow global leaders, as James Bond today. Except that the tragedy is, this is not a movie, and the doomsday device is real.
Now, of course, Boris Johnson has got a very long record. He's quite notorious for being a liar. Not a single credible scientist anywhere would tell you that we face extinction. I mean, that's just utter nonsense. But again, name one journalist in Glasgow who called out that lie. With global warming, many journalists and politicians have turned into paid liars and propagandists. And even if the Queen now says that we're in danger as she praises her late husband for predicting the worst, even if the Queen says it, that does not turn something false into something true.
I, for one, hope that this conference will be one of those rare occasions where everyone will have the chance to rise above the politics of the moment and achieve true statesmanship. If we fail to cope with this challenge, all the other problems will pale into insignificance.
You know the biggest danger we face, and it's not global warming. It's this organised lying, this climate of deceit. Politicians and press treating the truth as the enemy, the facts as inconvenient. And that is why the Prime Minister just spent another $2 billion of your money, all of it borrowed, on a lie.